What if self-pleasure were the missing link for next-level spiritual and business growth? Join the deliciously candid Dr. Fanny as she explains how to reveal your radiant self-expression through sensuality. Stay tuned. I am Gloria Grace Rand, founder of The Love Method and author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Live, Love, Engage: How to Stop Doubting Yourself and Start Being Yourself. In this podcast, we share practical advice from a spiritual perspective on how to live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically, so you can create a life and business with more impact, influence, and income. Welcome to Live, Love, Engage. Namaste. I am so excited for today's show because we've got an expert who is going to be coming on shortly who believes self-pleasure is the hack you need to reach your next level in business and in life. So I know that if you are intrigued by that, you're going to want to stick around. And if this is your first time joining us, I am Gloria Grace, the light messenger, and I help female entrepreneurs release negative thought patterns like self-doubt so you can grow a business that aligns with your soul's purpose. And as I mentioned, our guest today is this expert, and her name is Dr. Fanny Leboulanger. And she is known as the Sassy French Physician. And she is really on a mission to help people rediscover pleasure and stop their inner war and come home to themselves. And I'm excited to find out what her story is, how she got to be known, frankly, as the Sassy French Physician, what that all means. So I'm going to bring her on to the stage right now. So welcome, Dr. Fanny.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, me too. So yeah, I love asking our guests to kind of give a little background on themselves and tell us about, this journey, because I know that you've been on an interesting journey, I think, of how you got to be where you are today. So I wonder if you would share that with our audience.
Of course, I love that question. I have a pretty basic story of life knocking at the door and me being like, I'm not listening, and life knocking again and me, I'm not listening, until things crashed. So what happened is I am a French physician, and during med school, I had a diagnosis of epilepsy, age 26, out of the blue. You are allowed to have one seizure in your life. When you have a second one, that's called epilepsy, and so you need treatment. So I had to start looking and do some self-inquiry. And what happened at that moment is how I noticed how I was proud of submitting my body. Like, my body is a tool that is a service of my mind. And my mind was so proud of, I am the one in charge and you were following what I decide. Until literally my body switched my brain off. So I had to do some digging. Then I started to dive deep into the self-development work. I love that. And I also spent a lot of hours, months, years, and also a lot of money in things that would not make me feel that great. I have a loved one, I thank her for that, who said to me, with all the work that you're doing with yourself, how come you're still miserable? Ouch. But true. And so I started to want to dig deeper a little bit. And then there was this life combination moment the universe has the secret of, with a few things arriving at the same time. I had many patients. I work in gynecology on a daily basis. I don't have the title of a gynecologist, but I do the gyno work apart from delivery and birth. But like everything else, I can do that. The pap smear, the birth control, IUDs, and things like that. And so I had many, many people that were coming to me with issues I had no answer to. And the exams I was prescribing had no answer. people having pain and me being like, okay, I guess you're gonna need to go see a sexologist. Until the point it was like 3 patients out of 4, and I was like, "There's something wrong. If I need to send 75% of my patients to a sexologist, there has to be something else." I also remember this woman being 34 and whispering like, "Doctor, I think I'm broken because I'm 34 and I never had an orgasm." And I was considering myself lucky because I had orgasms before, and I was starting to feel a little bit weird about getting them only from my partner, as if suddenly, like, yeah, I don't know what's happening in here. So I started digging. I discovered the teacher that I had studied under. Her name is Lila Martin. She's amazing. And so I started bringing this modified tantric wisdom with my medical knowledge. And thanks to that, I have a zero bullshit tolerance. That's what I that's where I think my sassy French physician title that I give myself comes from. Because I truly believe we can change our lives if we do the real work. And I also truly believe that we can bypass and lose so much time, so much energy, and so many, or at least so much inner wisdom and life choiciness in doing, yeah, some that at least are not as efficient or as not I don't wanna say interesting because it's always interesting, but there are definitely ways to hack or fast track your self-evolution if you do the real work. And in my totally biased opinion, you're gonna hear me say that a lot. It's how when things start to change when you bring your body with you, and bringing your
Mm.
body with you, the best way to do that is to do it with pleasure.
Hmm. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about this, though. So you, when, especially, when you mentioned that you're having to discovering that all these people seem to be having this issue. So how does I guess discovering, or learning to maybe even find pleasure for yourself, how does that translate into, um, or should maybe I should say, what are the benefits of it beyond the strictly physical about it?
First, there is the whole chemicals and things that help your system feel good. And on a really basic and simple level, pleasure is your birthright. If you have a female at birth body or if you have a clitoris, you have a dedicated organ designed for pleasure with no other purpose than pleasure. And I truly believe, again, totally biased opinion, that honoring that is a way to honor your birthright. And when you honor your birthright, suddenly things start to change. Sometimes for the best, because you realign to your core and who you truly are. You understand how you feel, what you want. And also, sometimes it brings a lot of shit too. Like all of the things that you have put lovingly under the rug for years, or things that you haven't looked at, or things that you have consciously or unconsciously avoided. And all of that creates change. You will get that right back into your face. And since you are changing, there are also many people who will be like, what the fuck is happening to you? So it's really reclaiming the beauty of all. And that's pleasure, at least for me, is the only way I found to get a little bit closer or further on that journey.
Hmm. Now, as you're talking, though, I'm thinking that I don't know if it's still as much today, but I know for me, certainly growing up, there was a lot of stigma against it, and a lot of, and I'm like, I grew up Catholic. You're going to go to hell if you're, frankly, if you're going to, do something like that, because sex is for procreation. That's it. You're supposed to be, I think pleasure is, a byproduct. Except that I've also done, reading, and talking to other people that, frankly, it's especially between two people, it can really be almost when you connect with someone well, that it can be this really holy connection. So, but if so, what would be, well, I guess maybe the question I'm going to ask you is, what would you say to someone who's like, who still kind of feels that, this is something that they might feel guilty about or feel shame about? How do you handle that?
The sentence that I say the most, I think, is you're not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. It's the system that we're living in that is twisted and that is making us feel guilty or afraid or all of these byproducts from the society we're living in. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing that. Second, it's really important to allow yourself to feel them. I think so many of us, myself included, have tried to reject how we feel, reject what we think, because we should know better, because we have worked on ourselves, because. And it's really interesting. What I love about the work with the embodiment and the pleasure is that you're getting the tools to help you digest all of that, literally eating shame for breakfast, meeting your shame, meeting your guilt, meeting all of that with pleasure helps you connect to how these emotions are just fuel and sensations given meaning by your brain. And so when you come back to that, when you bring your body to that, you reclaim the energetic part of them, and then you can alchemize them or not. You choose. And
Mm.
sometimes you think you have alchemized them, and sometimes they come back, and that's okay. The beauty of doing all of that is that even if you are at the beginning of the journey, there is no way you can do it wrong, especially because pleasure is your birthright. There is no way you can harm yourself when you reclaim the pleasure journey. And I think that's really is something that needs to be said over and over, especially because of this guilt, shame, and everything that is going around.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Now, you've mentioned that pleasure might be able to actually transmute trauma. So, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know there's a lot of people, who've undergone trauma, and it'd be nice to know that there would be a way that they can help themselves. I know some trauma you really do need to get some expert support with, but maybe for a little more minor traumas. So, how does that work?
Again, with trauma, first seek help with a licensed person who know what they're doing, because there is a really big possibility of messing up with your system. And so I talk about trauma and I don't treat not trauma. I'm not a trauma therapist. When I talk about trauma, I do that with so much reverence and care, because this is about our humanity condition, and how, yeah, you can truly mess up with people if you don't do it correctly. That being said, trauma is in the body. The trauma has nothing to do with the event itself. Some people get traumatized after a weird nightmare that will create PTSD for 20 years. And others, I read some things about people being in the 9/11, yeah, 11 septembre. Yeah, 9/11, sorry, who were actually not traumatized because they were able to run down the towers and things like that. So it doesn't, in the what we think about the event has very little, if no, not at all, correlation to the trauma in the body. And the trauma in the body is the fight, flight, freeze reaction. So maybe the restriction of the mobility of this muscle or this articulation or this feeling of constriction that you can feel in your body mind, or a lot of things. that can go with that. And how pleasure can help you there is because it creates safety in the nervous system, because you're allowing your body to function the way it's supposed to do, because you have an orgasm dedicated to pleasure whose only purpose is pleasure. So when you honor that, you allow your system to come back to a state of peace, or at least a little bit more peace. And when you do that, you're allowed to experience these sensations and do what we call complete the stress cycle. These types, I'm sure you already experienced that once or twice. When you are in a state, maybe it's a state of pleasure, or maybe you're doing totally something else, and suddenly you have this urge to scream, to run, to kick, to do anything like that. This is a trauma pattern or a trauma reaction stored into your body that wants to be released, and that needs to be honored. In a self pleasure practice or in a pleasure practice, if you have an urge like that, we need to honor it so that the the movement needed, for example, is yeah, gets released. I love this example from Emily and Amelia Nagoski book Burnout. It's an amazing book, by the way. They talk about being chased by a lion, and how when we were walking in the savannah, if you were chased by a lion, you had options. Either you could run and hide, or run to the village and people will help. All of you will kill the lion, and then you will have a banquet after that. Or you would freeze, or you would get killed. Or if the lion is killed by someone else with a gunshot, the threat is gone, the lion is gone, but your system hasn't processed it. Your system is still in the feeling, crunching all of your muscle and clenching your breath and things like that. And for your system to go back to the safety, you need the movement to relax the muscle. You need the breath. You need the connection to your people. You need the banquet, for example, or the feeling of safety that can come from the interaction with people, and from the movement, and from the laugh, and from all of these amazing tools that, again, in my totally biased opinion, pleasure helps get another layer, deeper layer for the healing.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can actually understand that. But I want to go back to what I talked about at the very beginning and see about really um, how we can apply this in in a practical manner for our lives and for our business, because I do this podcast is aimed to help women entrepreneurs. So when you were submitting the form, to get on the show, you said that it's a hack to help you reach the next level in business. So how does that work? How
That's
does self
called
pleasure help there?
that's called sex magic.
Ah,
Because pleasure helps you digest your traumas, because pleasure helps you digest the shame, because pleasure helps you digest the guilt. It literally helps you get rid of the layers that are in the middle of you and the business that you want to have. So it helps really when you reconnect to your pleasure and reconnect to your senses first, because so many of us, sensual pleasure is, before talking about sexual pleasure, sensual pleasure is also really not really, don't want to say inaccessible, but really challenging for people to find at first, because we are so numb and functioning into our heads. So there's all of that. And when you reclaim your senses, when you allow your body to work in the way it's supposed to do, so there's all this part. And what I also love about sex magic is how it's literally, pleasure is helping your manifestation by 100%. Like, you can double your manifestation power with pleasure, because you're bringing your body with you. It's not only with your mind and visualizing and feeling good. Like, you're feeling good and visualizing with your mind, but your body is feeling good too. So, in terms of signal you're sending over there, like, hell yes. And I think the last thing that like to address as well is how, when you are committing to a pleasure practice, whatever it is, on a regular basis, you can understand and feel how each emotion, sorry, is their own source of energy and how you can play with that. I love this book from Carolyn Elliott. It's called Existential Kink, and how you can literally get off with things that your mind wouldn't consider something interesting or something to get off with. Whereas when you amplify your capacity to pleasure, suddenly you can experience angergasm, you can experience sadgasm, you can experience disgustgasm. And so all of what can happen to you in your business, like people having reactions that are not really helping you or not really, yeah, that are challenging you, suddenly you have this tool with pleasure to help you bring your body back to safety instead of continuing moving forward in this pattern that might help you and might hurt you in the long run. And also, if you want, you can get off with that. Like, okay, here's the mean comment. You know what? Let me play with that.
I love that. I love that. Oh, and I guess that's really the key, isn't it? To for being successful in business, to be able to manifest what you want. Because you mentioned how I know how important emotions are. Like people say, oh, you just need to do affirmations, but affirmations don't work unless you're really feeling it. Um, but you just mentioned something there about playing. So how does how does play kind of fit into all of this, what we're talking about?
On a general topic, I truly believe our world is way too serious and we're taking ourselves way too seriously than things are. Depending on your spiritual beliefs and things that you resonate with. Some people consider we're souls having a human experience, and how a big part of the play is acknowledging that you are not your thoughts, you're not your ego, and there is this whole distinction to make between your essence and who the ego think when the ego thinks you are sorry, when the ego thinks it is the essence. And so when you acknowledge pleasure, when and since pleasure is your birthright and your essence, when you acknowledge pleasure, there is this, oh god, I lost my train of thoughts. Oh my, I
Well,
was so
that
interested. Where
it's
I was going with
okay.
it.
Well, we were talking about fun, and how
Yes,
does playfulness kind of play into this? Pardon the pun.
yes. Thank you for reminding me. And so when you do that, when you reconnect to the essence, suddenly the heaviness around has less impact because you know you're here to experience it all. So experience the peaks and the valleys, experiencing the pure ecstatic bliss, and also the shit that is inherent to a human experience. And don't get me wrong, knowing that doesn't prevent you to doesn't erase any hard events that will come to your life, but knowing that helps soothe the mind a little bit. At least it works for me and the person the coachees I work with. So allowing you to get to that place of understanding that suddenly, yeah, we're taking ourselves way less seriously than, at least that's the case for me. Like, you're noticing when you use pleasure and you build your inner safety, suddenly you don't feel the outside circumstances have so much power on you. In a sense, they always have. Like, if I have a car accident, it definitely will have an impact on me. But some outside circumstances that I tended to give a lot of power to, especially others' opinions and things like that, or things going on in business, like how to do my marketing and things like that. When I reclaim the pleasure and when I connect to this essence, suddenly I'm noticing this is just a superficial layer that is basically killing my fun.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense. I wanted to ask you, so if someone listening to this or watching it today, maybe they're not really indulging in self-pleasure, but they are resonating with what you're saying and they want to get started, but maybe they're a little timid or a little afraid. What do you recommend to someone in that situation?
I love that because I love the beginner mindset. And because when you are in this beginning state, that's where you're going to notice the biggest shifts and changes. And we've all been there. I've definitely been there, being numb in an emotional numbness and feeling everything gray for so long that I was feeling half alive. So my mission is to help people step out of that. And you get thriving sex as a bonus. But in my opinion, what is important there is reconnecting to your senses in a broad way. Because before talking about sexual pleasure, if you don't know what feels good in your life, if you don't know what activates your turn on, what activates your senses, there is no way if you're living in 52 shades of gray and not the sex you want, there's no way if you have that you can get a turn on that will help you skyrocket and get amazing orgasms and shoot out your manifestation to the universe. So the idea here is to start slow and allow yourself to reconnect to your senses in a broad part. So maybe first have a 5 minutes experience with a piece of chocolate. I have that in the ebook. Well, I'm sure we'll have it in the show notes. It's called Essence. Like this guided exercises with a piece of chocolate that you can first look at for 1 minute, 1 minute and a half, and see while you're holding it how it melts and how it feels under your skin. Bring it to your ears and move your fingers, see or listen, sorry, to the sound it makes. And if the sound changes depending on the pressure you're applying, then smell it and smell it for maybe 5 to 10 breaths and notice what is changing there. Then bring it to your mouth and hear how it cracks and feel it melting. This simple exercise, you can spend 5 minutes with a piece of chocolate. So that's one part. And the second part is to reconnect to your body in a very simple and yet so potent exercise because you cannot, again, in my totally biased opinion, you need to build safety back into your body. And many of our issues, if not all of them, are related to how unsafe we feel in our bodies. And so reclaiming the power of our touch, the safety of touching yourself, even not in a sexual way at the beginning, just allowing yourself to give you a foot massage or a shoulder rubbing or a neck rubbing. And so allowing yourself to just experience that, allow yourself to make yourself feel good. Give yourself permission to be in charge of feeling good instead of looking for outside providers. And I say that with the kindest and most compassionate heart because that's what society invites us to do all the time and also spend a ton of money in doing that, in finding outside sources of comfort. But it's really, yeah, it's reclaiming the senses, the touch. And what I love when to start the journey is breast massage because
Mm,
usually our breasts can be first so numb. And then when we bring them back, they are one of the easiest gateway to connect the sensual and sexual ideas without having so much charge than, for example, touching your vulva or something. So it's
right.
really witnessing and building the sensations in the breasts. So basically, retraining your system to be okay with that. And then when you feel okay with experiencing pleasure, then you want more because it feels good.
Absolutely. And it's really it's taking, I talk about in with my clients and things that the importance of self-love, and that it's not selfish to feel that. And this is just that next uh, deeper way, I guess, or just another aspect of that, of being able to really show yourself love by allowing yourself to feel pleasure. And I love that example that you gave of the chocolate. I think that was just because it's like, oh, yeah. I mean, I was just like imagining it just while you were describing it, and just to feel how much of a sensuous experience that could really be.
Yeah.
Hopefully, my nagging cat is not being picked up on the, on the microphone. He's like right beside me going, Mom, it's time for you to pay attention to me. And it's like, I'm sorry, we're not done yet. So chill out, kiddo. I love you, but chill out. So, yeah, this has been so amazing. I wanted to ask you kind of two more things here before we wrap up today. Number one is, what are you curious about?
Expanding the depth of how I can feel things. Because usually people say you end up teaching what you need the most. And personally, I end up teaching people and sharing with them the journey, how to step out of self hate and numbness, emotional numbness, sexual boredom, and things like that. And so I'm really curious first about acknowledging and understanding why the fuck I am still hijacked by my mind again and again, even if I have done a shit amount of work on myself. And I think
Oh,
it's
please. I've been there
always,
too.
yeah. I'm trying to make peace with the fact that it might be here all my life and that is the deck of cards that I've been given, and I'll do better in the next one. So I think it's always, I'm definitely a student at heart. So I really, all of these ancient philosophies that and that hold so much wisdom. Like basically, the method I studied is a modified tantric approach, and I know that I want to study tantra. Like I am also a 500 yoga teacher, and I'm like I want to take an Ayurveda course as well. So I think overall, what excites me and what I am curious about is how are the different ways that we can heal ourselves on a holistic way, in a sense, or if not heal, at least be more in charge of our health and be more in charge of our existence and doing the work, because that's why, and then that's how, in my opinion, you get the lifegasm, because you have the tools, because you have the pleasure, because you have the capacity to experience it all.
Mm, yeah, that's wonderful. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that I should have, or any one last little bit of advice you want to leave our audience today?
I think what I love sharing at the end of an interview is how no matter how broken you think you are not. There, and I always say we're smart beings, we don't do anything stupid. Usually when something stupid happens is that a part of us hasn't gotten the memo that it doesn't need to hold our strength so hard there. It doesn't need to protect us that strong, because now we have grown up, we have overcome a lot of things, and these parts also are allowed to rest. And suddenly, when you allow these parts that have been clinging to their protective roles and doing that in a really efficient way, when you allow them to rest, suddenly you complete the stress cycle with them too. So you reclaim your energy. And so you come closer to this wholeness that you truly are and that you already know you are.
Mm, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that folks listening to this today or watching it uh, would like to know more about you, and maybe get some more support with helping to be able to really connect to to connect with themselves, fully and holistically, as you mentioned. So what is the best place for people to contact you?
So, if you want to hear more about the work I do, you can go to your favorite podcast platform. And my own podcast is called Your Sexified Life. Keep the Y at sexy because I'm French. I misspelled it and I was like, that's better. And I kept it. If you want to reach out on Instagram, you can go at with Dr. Fanny there. I am way more of a text girl and like an audiogram from the podcast. I'm not, I am slowly checking and trying to have my love hate relationship with the social media evolve. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I
So,
get
yeah,
it.
you can send me a message there.
All right, excellent. Well, I will be sure and have that information in the show notes, so not to worry about that. And you are such a delight, and I'm so glad that I was able to have you on the show today. And yeah, it's not something that we typically talk about on the show, but maybe that's one of the things that I'm glad you have a whole podcast about that, because I think we do need to talk about these things more often so that we can really reclaim all of ourselves and to be able to appreciate that. Again, I'll kind of bring it back to where I started at the beginning, this idea of this, that I think sometimes religion puts this shame and guilt on us. But at the same time, I think if God gave us this, for our creator, whatever you believe, gave us this ability to be able to feel, wonderful sensations, then why is it wrong to feel them? It doesn't make any sense. There's a disconnect there. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and I wish you much success with your work and with your podcast. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, right? Because I believe you're coming to us from France.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. And I also want to thank all of you as well for watching and for listening to our show today. And I really am so grateful for all of you and for those who have left us reviews on wonderful podcast platforms like Apple and Spotify and things like that. And so if you are not already subscribed to the podcast or our YouTube channel, I hope you will make sure that you do that. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. And I think that's going to do it for today. So until next time, I love to encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.